Conceptual site modeling can be very time-consuming, challenging, and more often than not, requires expensive and specialized tools. The point of today's video is simplifying the process, because honestly, I don't think it should be this hard to build a conceptual site model. So this video is going to be perfect for beginners or anyone in need of a refresher, because we'll be covering the basics of conceptual site modeling. I'll be showing you how to make a conceptual site model using CSM 3D VIS. It's basically a streamliner, so it makes the whole process so fast and it's so easy to learn. CSM 3D VIS comes with a 60 days free trial, so feel free to download it and give it a go. And let us know if you like it or not. Oh, by the way, one more thing. Everything that you'll see in this video is going to be in a practical document in this video's description. So now let's get going with the rest of the tutorial.
So let's start from the very beginning and let's take a look at the user interface. So this will be our main page where we'll see our model, and with the plane and also the axes. And in the top left corner, we have our menu bar with the new project function, open project save, manual, and about section. To the left, we have our tools and we have our assets, the position assets, rotation asset, scaling asset, and then we have the add map function, screenshot, etc. On the right side, we have the hierarchy panel. And this effectively is the active layer panel. So here, all of the assets that are visible in our conceptual site model will appear, and specifically, they'll be under the plane asset. Then, right next to the hierarchy panel, we have the assets library. So here we have all the 3D assets that come within CSM 3D VIS. So we have building, contaminants, geology, etc. So if we click on buildings, we have all the building assets. And it's the same for contaminants, geology, landscape, mining, etc. So we also have extra tools in this view, which is import terrain that imports DMs, digital elevation models. Then we have import GLTFs that imports 3D assets, and then also import 4D grids. Let me talk real quick about dimensions in CSM 3D VIS. So in gray, we can see the main plane, and then we can see the 3 axes with which we work in CSM 3D VIS. So laying on the plane, we see the X and Y axes, specifically X in red and Y in blue. And then we see the Z-axis, which comes out of the plane, is the one that defines the third dimension. So let's now try to import a site map in CSM 3D VIS. This is super easy to do, and we can do it just by heading to the toolbar to the left, then find and select the Add Sitemap function, and then double click on it. So there we go. This is our sitemap, and but as we can see, it's a little squeezed along the x-axis. So let's try to scale it a little to make it a little bit more realistic. And we can do this again very easily by heading to the Scale Asset tool. Then, as you can see, we can scale along all 3 axes, but in this case, we want to scale along the x-axis. We can also scale along the y-axis and, of course, along the z-axis. Now, obviously, nothing is going to happen now because this is a 2D image and there's no 3D component. We can undo any scaling by using the Ctrl-Z function. Now, let's go back to trying to scale to get the scale along the x-axis, right? So let's change this value from 1.5 to 2, and there we go. Now we have a map that is scaled correctly along the x-axis. Let's see what else we can do in CSM 3D VIS. So as you can see in the southwestern part of the site of investigation, there is 2 ponds. And we can add ponds in CSM 3D VIS to make them pop a little bit more. And we can do that by heading to the asset library, surface water, and then click on pond. So there we go. So this is our pond. And as you can see, we can move it along the z-axis, along the x-axis, and along the y-axis. We can also move in combination between 2 axes, in this case the y and z axis, or the x and y axis in this case, or along the x and z axis. If we want, we can rotate it around the y-axis and Ctrl-Z to undo, then the z-axis, Control Z, and then around the x-axis, Control Z. Now what I want to do is scaling it a little to make it about the same size as we see in the imagery. And I want to move it around a bit down. And then finally we rotate it. And then we make a final move. Let's rectify positioning a little bit more, and there we go. We can replicate the steps I just described to make the other pond. So like I said before, this is an old Colombian mine that was dismissed here in Quebec. And we know that here there's spoil heaps or rock waste. And we can add rock waste by going into the asset library, then select mining, then we can scroll down and select waste rock pile. Then let's scale it a bit and also add a little bit of a Z component. And now let's move it into the right position. So one common byproduct that comes with Colombian extraction is selenium. Selenium is a very high-grade contaminant. So let's pretend that there's traces of seleniums leaking from this spoil heap into the nearby pond. And we can select the plume of our liking. In this case, I like this red plume because I think it represents pretty well what could have happened in an ideal scenario. So let's scale it a bit. And then let's rotate it. And then let's move it into the right position. So after a bit of scaling and repositioning, there we go. So I think this is a very powerful way for showing how contaminants might have moved from the spoil heaps to the pond. So let's say we want to show an audience what the site of investigation looks like today. We can simply do it by selecting plane, which is the layer that contains the sitemap, and then add image. So here will appear the image that we decide to select from the imported images, and the imported images will appear at the bottom. And to import an image, we just select the plus sign, then select any image of liking. In this case, I wanted to add an image of the flooded pit shells. So let's say, for instance, now that I want to add an image of the tailings, I can select the waste rock pile, which is effectively our tailings layer. Then following the same workflow, I add an image of the tailings. And this is what the spoil heaps look like today. So again, very easy and very straightforward. So now let's go and see what we can do from a geological standing point. So let's head into the assets library, and then let's select geology, and then let's just select a random bedrock. So this is what the voxel ore box will look like. And of course, we can scale it, we can move it, and we can rotate it, just like with all the previous assets. So this is what our geological layer will look like. However, as you can see, all of the assets that we've added previously are not visible from the side. So what we can do to solve this is go into the active assets, then select bedrock, and head to the toolbar to the left and select change object opacity. Then you can use the slider to adjust its opacity. And as you can see now, the plume is visible. And of course, we can do this with any assets. And in this case, for instance, if you want to have a view of what's happening in the underground from above, we can change the opacity of the sitemap. So if we want to, we can even add buildings to our models or structures. So historically, we know that in this area here, there was a head frame. So we can head to the assets library, select mining, and then select head frame. There it is. Then of course, as we learn, we can scale this to make it look a little bit more realistic. And then of course, we can move it, rotate it, and then we can make the final adjustments. And then, by following the same workflow that I explained earlier, we can also add reference figures by selecting the layer, then add image, and then import image, and we can import the image of our liking, as you can see. So let's say, for instance, that the area just northeast of the site of investigation is a forest. And forest usually means receptors. We can go into the assets library, select the receptors, and then we can add in a deer. And of course, we can rotate it, scale it, and move it. And by following the steps that I described before, we can also add a reference image that serves as a final evidence that there is receptors that can uptake contaminants coming from the site. So this is it for today's workshop. There's more to come. And remember that all the documentation is in the description. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow us on YouTube and LinkedIn to stay in the loop with future updates and workshops. See you next time.